Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the least of many evils, O'Connor.
Yeah, did you like that? That's getting it's. I mean, I feel like that's an important concept. I am the least of many evils because people see my positions, Kevin, like my freedom loving, making fun of slightly retarded politicians. Like they see me as being wrong. I don't know how, but I'm less evil than the people I'm criticizing. They got to get that through their thick skulls.
All right, man.
Starting off adversarial this morning.
Yeah. All right. You're just talking about how Facebook was being nice for us, and you got to drop the R word in there. Now we're gonna get nothing.
That actually was a bad move. I shouldn't have done it. I do use the word probably more often than I should, but also it's one of those, like, I see it as this weird pushback against PC correctness that's been driving me crazy lately. You know me, I get obsessed with silly things.
All right. Someone tells you can't say something, you're like, well, now let's.
Yeah.
Wait. That's not actually what we're going to debate today. So I know some of you are wondering, why the heck are Tim and Kevin doing a show on Sunday? And old fans will know the answer is that we have to do an evergreen show for one reason or another. In this case, our producer Bob is going to be off on next week for Labor Day weekend, and he's going to be out, so we have to send him a show early. So we're gonna record an evergreen show, and what this show is going to be about just kind of general endemic problems with our government. We're going to talk about the bureaucratic hive mind. We're going to talk about the do something mentality of politicians. We're going to talk about one I didn't throw at you yet, but dispersed costs and concentrated benefits too, because I'm going to connect that one to the do something mentality stuff. Incumbent privileges. So we're going to talk about all these things. These are like challenges to like the concept of like a republic, and like how do we like these are problems that are going to pop up in any like democratic republic. So how do we work around them and if not like solve these problems, then at least make them a little bit better.
Yeah, I feel this certain sense of a coherency between the issues that I've been wrestling with and the issues that you've been wrestling with, even though they may seem slightly disconnected to start with. I think that there is a broad-based connection here. And when we get into this hive mind government thing, I think it's going to segue nicely into the things that you're talking about as a great overview of just what is going on, that people are just they're outraged and they're confused and they're like, angry, outraged, pointing their fingers at each other, and I love to say this, but it's all by design. They are getting exactly what they want. See, there's air quotes around they in there.
They. Who's they?
Yeah, the they. I'll talk about it, man. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Great. All right. That works. But that's the show, folks. We'll leave your comments if you have any other stuff to add, like any other like endemic problems, for the folks who find this and get to see the live version. Any other endemic problems with our republic. Like we're talking about this, some of the big thick issues to be able to get around in a functioning republic, in a constitutional republic, and these are tough problems, and it's not going to be like a news of the week type of thing because we're doing that evergreen type of show. So we're going to try mostly not talk about current events, but some of that's going to end up creeping in.
It's going to slip in there, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Evergreen shows they still have to have some topical information, don't they?
That's right. We're gonna anchor it to like tangible, events, right?
Sure we
about like
the
price gouging, COVID policy, whatever. Right.
One benefit we have is that I'm on caffeine and not alcohol, so I either will be able to focus better or I will not be able to focus at all. So we'll see how that balance plays out.
Do we get like like the caffeine ADHD, or we get the caffeine like focus? Like, hey, this is what I'm talking about. We'll see.
I should try Adderall. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll do an experiment. Okay. The control group is alcohol, but like we'll give Tim some Adderall one show and see how he does. See if he stays on topic.
Do what?
Then you won't change topics. You just get like, no, man, we're talking about this thing the whole show.
That would be weird. Like absurdly weird. No one would buy it. They would be like, "What is wrong with Tim? Is he on
Yeah.
drugs?"
And the answer in that case would be yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go in like 10 seconds and we'll kick this show off. Then
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wills here today, joined by Tim, the least of many evils, O'Connor.
Thanks, Kevin. That doesn't flow as well as the freedom variant, but I'm not going to keep this one for long.
We're trying it. You got it in the name. I was like, all right, I will respect the name that you have told me to call you. You know, it's just what I do.
You're a good man. You're a better man than me. You know, like I want to challenge every single identity politics thing that comes down the road. But anyway, just like, let me start with thanking WYSL for once again providing two libertarians with an opportunity to explore issues on a radio broadcast that's actually being put out to thousands of people. Like, that is an amazing opportunity. And then we've got to thank the people that participate in our show and the people that are going to watch this on like Spotify or on YouTube at a later date. Like, you guys are incredibly important to the effort that Kevin and I are putting in. And just thanks to everybody. It's Sunday. I'm feeling grateful. I want to have that conversation and I want to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we appreciate you, WSL audience, and our live audience that engages with us online. Leaving your comments is a huge part of the show, and it makes it a lot of fun. So, all right, what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of talk about some kind of big endemic issues to a constitutional system of government, to anything that's going to happen in a democratic republic. There's certain problems that are going to rise over time, incentives that are endemic to how like an electoral government works, and the problems that are going to pop up with executing the laws and other stuff associated with electoral governments, right? So, and that's what I think we're going to start with first. We're going to talk about the bureaucratic hive mind, but we're going to get to like the kind of incentive of to have a do something mentality with politicians, the dispersed costs and concentrated benefits of certain policies that we have, incumbent privileges, and many more. If we get more, we'll see what tangents we end up going down.
I know the tangents are going to be the best part always. I think I just love that.
Sometimes guided by comments as well. So Tim, let's jump into it. You threw out one of your tweets to me about the bureaucratic hive mind. Explain what it is. Explain what you're talking about.
So all too often people come back with, and you and I have had this conversation, and I feel like people want to believe that the government is an extension of the people's will. That it in and of itself is us fighting in the free market of ideas, trying to push this behemoth, this Goliath in a certain direction. And I've been struggling with this ability to come to a rational understanding of what's going on, because when I hear that intuitively in my stomach, in my brain, and in my heart, it does not feel accurate. I feel like that we are looking at something that performs it like it has goals that are contrary to what Tim wants and what Kevin wants and what it seems like by and large the collective consciousness wants, and then it forces us into corners or paints us into corners where to fight our way out we have to attack each other, and then the inevitable conclusion from that manufactured argument is that the bureaucracy is what actually wins the argument, is what actually we all then default to this government style solution that whereby we get the perception that we're punishing our enemies, whereby we're getting this perception that our our bigotry and biases are being validated, and it's driving me crazy. So I want to talk about this concept of people are, and you and I have talked about it. We're talking about AI and how it's a tool for lots of different things, and that in the wrong hands, it could be used by bad actors to benefit themselves and perhaps damage society. But when we get right down to it, I'm looking at the government. I'm starting to look at the government as this behemoth, this hidden leviathan that has goals, that has like not just goals, but is vying for survival, that it will take on anything that threatens its power, it will take on anything that threatens to minimize its impact on the world, and it will take on anything that threatens to minimize its rational ability to continue to grow in what it perceives to be a successful fashion. So I know that might sound a little bit conspiratorial, a little bit like, has Tim lost his mind? I'm literally killing Kevin, willing to make the case that the bureaucracy is alive and sentient, and that it is enforcing its will upon us. That's the case I want to make.
No, I don't think that that's incorrect at all. In fact, nor conspiratorial, right? Like there's a lot of incentives for people to want to keep their jobs, like just at the base level, right? Like the bureaucracy wants to perpetuate itself, and the perpetuation of that bureaucracy, the perpetuation of the jobs and the mission that it sees itself doing is more important to them than whatever policy outcomes like politicians may or may want to achieve, right? So like, if we take specifically like the Department of Education and its mission to, in theory, improve educational outcomes across the country, that sometimes ends up being secondary to like the continued existence of that bureaucracy. Like they want to stick around, they want to continue having jobs, they want to get more money, even if that money is, isn't necessarily going to be better used achieving that outcome than like keeping it at the local level. And so we end up with democracies that are bloated, self-perpetuating, and constantly growing, serving their own ends rather than serving the ends of the people. And I think this is, I talked about at the top of the show, like endemic problems with our republic. This is one of the things, when you create bureaucracies, you have to almost assume that this will inevitably happen if left unchecked. Right.
And then that checking motion, that thing that we think exists, that we have the ability to put a check and a balance on this, is, I think, wildly overrated. I think the Department of Education might in fact be a perfect example. That in the name of getting people upset over identity politics, the Department of Education literally feasts on the anger of the populace, that it can, to the extent that it can direct it at one another. It literally feasts on that. Its existence is perpetuated by churning out people that don't understand analogies and juxtapositions, right? That play sophistry when they argue politics. And then that's on both sides. I certainly enjoy the sophistry of the right much more than I enjoy the sophistry of the left. I've got to be honest about certain things here that I've come to even realize about myself, where I get painted into that corner. So that, what do you think about that? That it's very survival, that the people in that system realize that they have to foster division, that they
right. So you're saying like they not only perpetuate themselves for the sake of keeping jobs, but they must also change the culture to give justification for their continued existence, right? No, or not even just justification, but also like to create the culture where like people want to seize the mechanisms and the power that bureaucracies have in order to impose their culture on others.
That's a very adequate point towards what I'm pointing at. I'm saying, like, when we think of some of the greatest like words ever issued, right? Like where interests align, no formal conspiracy is necessary. And if the interest is the primary survival of an institution or a collection of institutions, no formal conspiracy has to align. It has been able to grow by signaling virtue and making people angry with each other. So that is, in fact, it's blood. It's lifeblood. It's food.
Right.
I I
No,
mean,
sure.
look,
I mean, like, and in particular in education, like that's there's been a push on left and right to try to impose their values through the educational system, and that creates a lot of incentives to pour more money into it, to give more power into it, because it is to them a long-term cultural battle. Education isn't a neutral force for giving students the tools to learn. It is a force for shaping the culture for the next several decades. And again, this is like a left and right thinking type of thing. It's not a one or the other
it's
mentality. So
almost, yeah, a
yeah.
perfect analogy, right? A perfect like recognition that battling for control over that institution is, in fact, feeding that institution and its ability to maintain its power. So again, like the libertarian solution is like, let's abolish this monster. Let's abolish this behemoth that's not working. Let's bring education back to a local level. I think you make great points that are hard to counter when, like, tyranny can be imposed on a local level, and at no point should we ever accept tyranny. So it's gets into a conundrum that, in fact, benefits that behemoth hive mind. So
Yeah.
now, will we get to the best solutions? No, but simple. We won't get to simple solutions. We'll get to the Javier Milei solutions of abolishing these corrupt, like, bureaucracies, getting rid of afuera. Like that's actually the real solution, and that's why libertarian voices are minimized, because a classical liberal and myself, despite our overwhelming like divergence on certain cultural issues, not even overwhelming. I've got to be honest. I'm very close to like people are cool. Let the people be people. As long as they're not forcing stuff on me, I want them to be my friend, and I want them to do what they want to do. Oh my God, I lost my train of thought. That's the problem with caffeine versus alcohol. In a weird way, I can concentrate better on alcohol. So where was I?
That's all right. Well, so let me bring it back to like, yeah, okay, like we talked about that solution, and again, it's gonna have to be like that tough thing, because here's what happens every single time, right? You get situations like, actually, well, I'll bring it back to a Ronald Reagan maxim, like there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program,
Yeah.
right? Like no one wants to like be out of a job again. Like you create a program, you solve the problem. They're going to look for new problems to solve, right? Like
Right.
the Department of Education started with a certain mandate to solve a set of problems. They're not going to just go away when they solve those problems. They're going to go find new things to do. And so you have like that aspect of it. And then you have the job aspect of it. And politicians don't want to be seen cutting jobs. Like, and again, like you and I were like, hey, this is a massive waste of money. This isn't actually accomplishing its mission anymore, and it may be counterproductive to like its own stated mission, in fact. So we should do that. But politicians are like, oh, but think of the jobs. And I think of like the California high-speed rail situation, right?
Oh my
Because you
God,
have that
that's
like
awesome.
that situation where they built like a mile of track, at the point in time we were talking about in this show. But what are they tweeting about? They're like, we created 1,000 jobs. I'm like, you've created 1,000 jobs that have accomplished nothing, absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
And yes, oh yeah, like what does it stink for those people to lose their jobs? Yeah, sure. But like, how much money are you sucking out of the economy that could be going to other jobs elsewhere, the seen and unseen, that are instead going to these 1,000 jobs that are accomplishing nothing, not actually building anything for the residents of California or the United States? How many billions of dollars of federal money and Californian money are going into holding down these like however many jobs they've created?
I mean, that feeds my narrative of a behemoth leviathan that wants to survive, that its goal is surviving. The interests are aligned there. This they're like, we will feast on we will suck the marrow from the bones of society so long as we survive, is the vibe that I'm getting from this monster.
Yeah. And like
I
that's
mean, I'm laughing, but in a way, it's like that's what I'm seeing. So I don't know.
no, I'm like that's exactly what it is, right? Like, because again, like we'll bring it back to that economic concept, like they don't think of themselves, and some voters don't think of it this way, but like, yeah, it is like it's parasitic in some ways, like especially if you're
Mhm,
not actually accomplishing the thing that you're doing, right? If it's
mhm.
taking us 30, 40, 50 times as much to build a mile of highway, a mile of like commuter rail, a mile of high-speed rail than it did decades ago. And it's okay, we've created more jobs doing it, and I'll use air quotes on that. Like that is not serving society better. Like you're parasitic. You're just transferring money out of like people's wallets and into the pockets of bureaucrats, because like it ends up being like a whole bunch of bureaucrats. Okay, well, we got to get like these environmental permits, and then well, like this is also gonna, we have this program to fund environmental nonprofits to help them challenge permitting. And they have a lot of incentive to like ask the government for more money to make them more effective at challenging the permits, which means you have more bureaucrats. You need to look at more stuff, and then at the end, you have like 3 guys actually building something, and like 10,000 bureaucrats like haggling over permits while like nothing gets done. And so all that you've done in the end is transfer a bunch of money from taxpayers to bureaucrats. Like that's it. They get wealthy. They get to live in nice houses. They get to be comfortable while they've contributed absolutely nothing of substance to society.
That's perfect, right? That's a perfect analogy. We've all been driving down the road where we see a work site, and look, I'll be the first to admit, like I feel this where I drive past a government sponsored work site and I see 15 guys standing there doing nothing with one guy with a shovel. 7 guys with a clipboard, one guy with the flag, one guy standing at the other end of the job site, like one guy sitting in the truck, one guy running a machine, like, and then one guy with a shovel. And I'm like, I feel that. And then let's talk about just for a second too, Kevin, while we're at this subject, that there are perverse incentives created by these government programs. Like we create a program to solve a housing crisis, right? And what that actually finds a way to do is create homelessness, incentivize more homelessness, to fund programs to encourage homeless people to gather in San Francisco, right? So because they get grants per capita there, it's this nasty behemoth of an organization that is just focused on surviving.
There's incentives, right? Like if the incentive is to have participants in your program, then the incentive is going to be to have, again, have more homeless people participate in your program. If the incentive is to solve the problem and to get people in like permanent stable housing and like able to get jobs, like that's a bit different. But a lot of times the incentives aren't towards that. They're towards like filling beds. And you could say the same thing about like prisons, and like particularly like private prisons is a thing too.
Yeah.
If the incentive is we need to keep people here because that keeps, our paychecks flowing, like they're going to find ways to keep people there. If the incentive is we get paid more if people are out and successful and like don't go back to prison, you might get more of that. So there are ways to use nonprofits and private corporations to create the incentives that you want. But if the incentive is to continue perpetuating the problem, you're going to get more of the problem. It's, it's the lot of unintended consequences here is that just, like the good intention of like, we want to help people immediately with homelessness. Like, yeah, I'll accept that as a good intention of like people who maybe not like the participants, but the voters who support those types of programs. Like, oh yeah, like of course I want to solve this problem. But like the long term is like, there's a lot of incentive for people to keep the problem going because there's a lot of money tied up in it.
Yeah,
and they're not going to vote themselves out of a job.
I've got a certain level of, I've got to admit to a certain level of paranoia when I was like, all right, let's empty the prisons because there's a lot of injustice going on with sentencing laws. And I'm like, there's no way like an empty prison is going to stay empty for long. What they're going to do is incentivize a different way to create more criminals. And then you see the ATF automatically like writing a regulation that will like potentially jail people over a pistol brace. Like it's, to me, and I know it's a little bit paranoid, but to me, it's also a very real problem. Again, with the hive mind and this government.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's like it's
eating off of society. It's just
there's lobbying from both state-owned prisons and private prisons. And people always point out the private prisons are lobbying for this, but some of the unions are like, hey, we need this many people to keep this prison going. So like, if you don't want to lose jobs in this area, find reasons to keep our prison going. Either subsidize it or find more people to put in here. And that's a really negative incentive. Again, that's that's what we're gonna talk about this later about
Yeah.
like that kind of dispersed cost concentrated benefits. There's a lot of benefits to go after.
I don't think it could be overstated as raising awareness to the possibility, like that these perverse incentives are going to destroy society. It can't be overstated, Kevin.
No, 100%. And so like if we don't do something to stop it, if we don't do like the Javier Milei thing, like we're gonna have serious problems where we're not able to function as a society anymore because it's all just graft at the end. But on that note, on that positive note, we're gonna have to go to break. Thank you, WYSL audience, for listening to A Free Solution. We're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right, and Tim, I'm gonna need you to chill out for just a second. I forgot to plug my computer in, and my plug is downstairs. I will be back in like a minute.
I will lecture extemporaneously on more of my paranoid conspiracy theories, Kevin. Look, I could, in fact, while we're covering for Kevin, taking a little time, I could use some comments to, reflect off of, right? So what I'll do is kind of read my tweet stream, propaganda from AZ and Cab. Propaganda around an election. Can you imagine? And look, that's fine, guys, as a tweet, as a standalone concept, recognizing that the society has incentivized propaganda is wildly important, but it's not just around an election. It's a daily obnoxious occurrence that the government is foisting on us constantly. And look, I don't know about you guys, like I've been getting pretty active with Twitter again. The algorithm has been benefiting me, but there's a certain amount of reality that I think the Twitter reply bots is an actual system, right? Like where you have a wall of phones, you have one dude getting paid some certain amount of money, and they see a tweet that supports us fighting, and they take and they do what they can to raise it up in the algorithm.
Tim, I left you alone for 1 minute, and you're on Blue Anon Twitter conspiracy stuff.
Oh, bro, I am absolutely, man. I'm all over that Blue Anon conspiracy stuff, and that does not allow me to excuse the same behavior when I see it from the right. Like it doesn't. That's the beauty of being like an oddball philosophical purist on some level who still responds emotionally to lots of stuff. Like I know who I am, Kevin. You know what I mean? Like I get it.
Oh man,
but, that's what I'm gonna do, man. That's it.
No, fair enough, man. All right, so I think we'll just jump back into the next segment. Sorry about that, folks. I forgot to plug my computer in, and my battery was like the last like 5 minutes was like your battery's dying. I'm like, oh god, okay, I better make it.
That's like when
the end of the segment.
Yeah, that's like when the Wi-Fi signal comes up on the screen. You know you're heading for a problem right in the middle of an important segment, and when it doesn't, when I'm right in the middle of one of my rants, it's like it's like a kick in the gut. It really is. It's freaking wild.
No, so but should be good now. I'm plugged in. I'm good. Absent any other like Wi-Fi problems or anything else, that should be all right. So we'll go back in a few seconds, and we'll keep talking about what we're talking about.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go back in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined by Tim, the least of many evils, O'Connor.
Whew, that is a mouthful, brother. Holy cow!
It is. I'm trying to get better at it.
I don't know that you can get better at it. It's just too many words, and it doesn't flow correctly.
I have to go back to the freedom variant.
I'm gonna have to go back to the freedom variant or some variant of the freedom variant that is also as catchy, because A, that's more fun, and B, that's more what I'm all about. I did want to poke fun at the concept that the least of voting for the lesser of two evils is in fact the impetus of allowing this behemoth, this Goliath, to survive and feast on our emotions. Like that's this. Mm-hmm. We're like, well, let's replace the current crop of tyrants with a whole new bunch of tyrants because I think they'll like me better. And I think
slightly better.
Yeah, that's absurd. That's an absurdity on its face that anybody with 100+ IQ should be able to reject on its face. They should just say, my collection of tyrants that I want to empower to punish that group of crazy people is going to, that power that we grant them is inevitably going to be turned against me or my children. And why do we fall for that scam?
It's a good question.
It's a
Uh,
scam though, bro. It's a total scam. It robs value. You were alluding to the fact that it's a parasitic organization.
yeah,
I make jokes about how supply side economics enabled the largest government growth in the history of man, but yet, like at that time, government spending was like less than 20% of GDP, and now it's up around 25. It peaked in the COVID era at somewhere around 31, 32%. This is an absurdity based on metrics that are not real. Like it's just a power monster feeding itself. It's disgusting. Urgh.
no, it is. But well, let's get to like some of the things that like feed that, right? Like, so I want to talk about two issues that like kind of feed that bureaucracy, feed that perpetuation of growing the government. And so one of them is, actually we'll talk about the dispersed costs and concentrated benefit side of it, right? So like this is like up here, like this is like the actual like legit corrupt stuff that happens in government all the time, but is perfectly legal. And these are things
Yeah.
like, subsidies for particular programs, because it's not just the bureaucracy. We talked about like the perpetuation of like nonprofits and private corporations that solve a particular government problem that have a strong incentive not to do that. This is more like we want to protect American companies, and in order to protect American companies, we're gonna do a little protectionist tariff, or we're gonna add some like taxes to like certain types of businesses that we don't like, or whatever it is, right? So
Oh
there's a
shit.
lot. Yeah, so there's a lot of companies that do this, or a lot of industries that do this. So we can think of like the sugar one is one that like libertarians like to bring up a lot, because like most people don't know that there's a sugar tariff. There's a pretty steep sugar tariff that makes it very expensive to import sugar from anywhere overseas. And this is done to protect the relatively inefficient Florida sugar growing companies. And so that way we have like American grown sugar, even though we could get it cheaper and just as high of quality if we imported it from South America or wherever else.
Mhm.
This does not cost Americans a lot of money. It is like, it's on the order of like a few bucks a year, right? Like
Right.
you wouldn't notice it if we suddenly repealed the sugar tariff. You would notice like sugar prices would go down slightly.
Slightly.
Yeah. But no one outside of weirdo libertarians are like, we need to repeal the sugar tariff because like it's corrupted, because like it just doesn't matter that much. It's not going to change anyone's lives. You're not going to notice it. Like, but for these companies, it matters a whole lot. It is like in some cases, like they're the difference between existing and not existing, or existing but making slightly less money. And so these things are everywhere. And in some cases, it does cause real tangible harm to American citizens. And one of those cases was with the baby formula shortage, right?
Ooh, that's a good one, bro.
So
That was so wild. Let's rerun that for our audience. Like, let's
yeah,
talk about exactly what the heck happened there. That's a good bro. That fits so perfectly with this concept of this hidden Goliath that is stealing from us. So yeah,
that's right.
I love it. Go
And
you
so
go.
there's kind of two elements to this. So if you don't remember what had happened, what was it in 2022 or 2023?
Yeah.
It was there's only a handful of baby formula manufacturers in the United States, and one of them had a serious problem. There's a serious contamination issue that pulled a massive amount of baby formula off the shelves, and they were going to have to do a lot of work in order to like correct the issue of contamination. So with fewer companies producing suddenly, and again, this is something like when my son was young, he was still on formula. Like it was a serious concern for me. Like you could just not find stuff. Like you would show up at the store and it'd be like, oh, there's nothing here. Like we'd look on the apps, like we'd look on like Target app and like, wow, none of the stores in the area have it. Or like one store and it's like a 40-minute drive away has this. And like, we're lucky that like we have the app and we can look at this.
Yeah.
Imagine you have to drive to all these places. And so what we could have done is we could have just said, you know what? It is extremely cost prohibitive to have European formula companies that have high standards of their own sell formula in the United States. They can't get the FDA approval for it. And even if they could, there's tariffs on this stuff. So we could maybe rethink that and allow for a more diverse market of baby formula in the United States by allowing the import of European formula, no tariffs, and just approving the ones that are subject to, that are already approved by European regulators that are just as strict as US. But no, we couldn't do that. And in fact, what ended up happening was like the Biden administration flew a plane full of baby formula to look like they were the big heroes. And the reason why it took them so long to do any action on this, eventually there's some allowance for temporary importation of like European formula. But the reason why they didn't do that is because the dairy industry would have been mad. And literally like confirmed, like the dairy industry, they thought that they would, maybe make them upset. So the Biden administration held on to this while babies were literally starving in order to protect their interests with the dairy industry. Like how cynical do you have to be to choose your buddies in the dairy lobby over actual babies?
I think that's a wildly fantastic point, that there's a certain amount of cynicism and there's a certain amount of greed, and then there's the absolute opportunity to virtue signal on a solution that isn't even close to any kind of real solution. Flying a couple of planes to Europe and bidding up their baby formula market in a concentrated effort to put on a show that was worthless. Like, look, our man Chase Oliver, God bless him, he's entering into the economics fray, and he's making statements occasionally that I enjoy. All right. Free markets are stable markets, that if the bid base is bigger, that the demand is automatically correcting. If price fluctuations between us and Europe are enough that we can purchase baby formula from a European country, that's a factor of stability. Like, it does not, it's a wild problem that feeds this behemoth that is bent on its own existence.
Yeah, I mean, like you create situations where you have plenty of substitutes. Maybe like the European formula producers, like they're still not going to have like a huge market share because it's still going to be kind of expensive to import everything over, blah blah blah, right? But you still have substitutes, so that like when one company fails, because there's only a handful of companies that do this in the US, it's not a catastrophe. It's not a situation where babies are literally starving. And to have Biden flying a plane, like the sheer volume of stuff that happens in our capitalist economy, like it is hard for the average, like flying in a single plane. Like, do you know how much cargo goes on one of those cargo ships? It is absurd. It is mind-blowing. And we are doing that many times every single day around the clock. Like, so yeah, a plane is nothing. It's worthless. It is a pure virtue signal. And and God, I know, like, it's like it makes me mad. Like, this is so useless to make yourselves look like the hero. And what we could do instead is, again, open up the markets, have free markets, lower tariffs, and because this is something that is it's an issue for the life and health of American citizens, and to choose the loyalty of lobbying organizations to even worry that, like, oh well, what if they choose to back the Republican instead because like we decided to help babies? Like, man, that is so cynical. And I'm not usually cynical about this stuff. Usually it's you doing that stuff, but like this one I read and I'm like, it's absolutely disgusting to me. And unfortunately, this is a thing that happens all the time. Again, in most Americans, like, if you're not having a child in like this age, like you might not even be thinking about this stuff. But like this happens time and time again, where we decide like, okay, we're going to subsidize baby formula through protectionist tariffs and taxes and like direct money subsidies. We're going to subsidize the dairy industry generally by like buying up surplus dairy. Which is something we still do to create, like, to artificially raise the prices of dairy and to raise the price of American grocery bills. The government buys stuff. We do it with all sorts of produce across the board. And again, it doesn't cost us like all that much. It's not something that we're going to see. And even if they remove these programs, it might just like mean like stuff is a few cents lower. But all of that starts to add up. And you create that instability that we talked about. If you don't have a world market, dare I say it, globalization, Tim, if we don't have that, like, we create more instability, and it ends up hurting people when something goes wrong. And something's always going to go wrong. We want to have those substitutes to be able to turn to when some catastrophe happens with the company. That creates redundancy. It creates a robust economy. It creates a situation where Americans have stable and reliable flow of goods, no matter where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, when we use globalization in that term where I could trade with a dude in Russia, I'm like, that's the kind of globalization that I can live with. Like, that was one
No,
of
yeah.
I'm going to get on a weird tangent, but like, that was one of the promises of Bitcoin, that me and a Russian dude with access to the same kind of computer technology can agree on a value of this subjective piece mechanism of trade. And I absolutely love that philosophical, like, narrative of it, that the government did not have a right to interfere with what he and I agreed is the correct value for this thing. Like, if a tenth of a Bitcoin is a Russian car, and then another tenth of a Bitcoin is to get it shipped to me, like, that to me was beautiful and poetic. And I know my example doesn't meet up with people's realities, but it's
No, sure.
an exaggeration to make a point, right? It's an absurd exaggeration, probably, but like, that to me was absolutely the promise of a non-governmental controlled currency. So I'm with you on that. I think another area, not that I want to drive you away from the obvious explanatory value of baby formula, but another area
Mhm.
where regulatory markets and captured markets are creating a massive problem for American people it's in a related industry, right? Is the provision of medicines. Okay.
Yeah.
One, and this is where I'm going to go like all crazy. Like, one of the greatest things that Trump started to do was deregulate medicine purchases across borders. Okay. So when I take Eliquis, which has probably been a lifesaver for me on some level.
Same. I know. We're both benefiting from that one.
Yeah, if I didn't have insurance, I could buy Eliquis from Canada for like $200 a month, Kevin. $200 a month. In the United States, it would cost you $1,200 a month to $1,800 a month out of your pocket. That's what putting an artificial barrier around trade has done to America. And the nonsense of this bureaucracy forcing you to buy health insurance because that's the solution has helped create and enforce these artificial bubbles, these artificial
Yeah.
trade barriers that uh, are not serving the American people, that are destroying value and putting it in the hands of big business and government. Like, that's the reality that
Right.
we
Yeah, when you don't
face.
have to face any competition. And I think there's something to be said about, like, patent laws for things when they first come out. But like, if there's no
Sure.
competition ever, then like there's no incentive to lower prices.
Right.
And
You have
and then
patent
that's the
laws
corruption. Yeah.
and trade barriers, like no free trade. You have
Yeah.
patent laws and the fact that these things can't travel across borders. Okay. Like, that's wildly huge. It's underplayed. And it's one of those things to me that is, and here, let me expand on this concept because we're going
Tim,
philosophical today.
I know you want to do that, but
Ah,
we have to head to break.
that's
So
fine.
sorry, Tim. I know
That's
it's
fine.
where, but thanks again for joining us here on WYSL. If you want to hear where Tim is going with this, go find a podcast. Go find a free solution. We're all over the place on Spotify, wherever. Listen to what Tim has to say. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. I got to start just like playing music and play you out, Tim.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, that's okay because at some point there, I almost lost my train of thought. And then when you went that we're going over time, I completely lost my train of thought. So it's like,
Oh
what?
no.
Where was I? What was I saying? That's again, I think that's a caffeine thing.
That's a caffeine. You're like, no, I'm going down
Yeah.
this road. And
Yeah.
no. So you were talking about like the how like trade barriers and regulations and patents like kind of make things more expensive for Americans.
Yeah. So what we have is okay. I know what the point I was going to try to get to is we have a double-edged sword there of patent protections and artificial barriers as to where we can get our medicine from. And so, honestly, like, it's way underrated when Trump started to eliminate those barriers to importing medicine. It God, Kevin, to me, I go so far as to say the behemoth, the Leviathan, had to double down to protect its revenue streams and its ability to parasite off the American people.
Yeah.
So it had
Well,
to get involved in taking Trump out. Like that's how
I don't
far I
think
went.
so. I mean, I think that
No, it's fine that I think that argument should be countered, but I'm ready for it. You know what I
no,
mean?
I just not that like there is an incentive to like support Team Biden over Trump for like that reason, because like all these industries have lobbyists who are doing different things at different times to support different folks. Like it's just I think that the pharmaceutical industry isn't necessarily the only player moving here, and no matter how much money they pour into like one side or the other, it doesn't always move the needle of the American people who might have just been like sick of Trump shit. It's
I think personalities are an absolute too big. Like, yes, can you be sick of Trump shit, and do I respect you for that? 100%.
yeah. Like I mean, like I think like
100.
honestly, I think this election and the last election is just vibes.
Mhm.
Like is it like the policies do not matter, and that's why Kamala Harris is like just talking about like vibes the whole time.
She's taken on some amazing policies, though, and we're going to talk
Yeah,
about
no,
one of
we're
them
we're
in
talking
the
about that.
next segment, right? Like,
Yeah, we are.
going to end
But
price gouging, brother. Yay.
yeah, but again, those are one of the things I would give Trump credit for is he started to like look at this system where like we've created artificial barriers that make it so that companies don't have any incentive to lower prices, right? Because it's not like even necessarily about like taking down these companies. It's just that like the companies are going to continue to be greedy. They're going to be as greedy as they can be, and so they're going to charge the highest price that they're allowed to charge. If they don't
Yeah.
have competition, that price is going to be higher. If they have a lot of competition, that price is going to have to be lower. They're still going to find a way to make money. It is the same thing when we talk about the price gouging on the grocery stuff. It's the same thing. The companies are going to, yeah, they've always been greedy. They always want to make as much money as possible, but they can only charge as much as people are willing to pay. And if they have an alternative easily available to them, then they're not going to be able to charge much more than the competition.
Yeah. Look, greed in a much ballyhooed and overstated kind of sentiment, greed is actually perfect. It's actually good. Like if there wasn't so many negative connotations to the word greed, it's an important component of efficient markets. It's an important component of who we want to survive and who gets to generate value. It's like I want to provide for my family, therefore I am greedy. Fine. I accept it. That's it.
And sometimes being greedy means like I have to lower prices because like I've literally been in a position where like I'm setting prices for goods at like an online company, and sometimes we look at it and we're like, actually, if we lower the price here by 50 cents, we get a bunch more customers, and our margin is still sufficient that we end up making a lot more money from it. Like that's what it is. Like, hey, actually, it benefits us to lower prices because more people buy things.
Yeah,
whereas
benefits
a
your
little bit
sense of
higher.
greed.
Yeah. Whereas if it's a little bit higher, yeah, we make more profit off of each sale, but so few, but a lot of people's like, that's too much for me, right? So that's how that greed incentive works.
Yeah.
And one last thing on Trump and like the medical stuff, like the price transparency stuff that he was trying to push for during his administration, also excellent, right? Like I want to be able to know how much procedure and medicine is going to cost at different facilities, across my region. You don't always have the ability to make that decision, but like having some knowledge, because sometimes even within the same system, within the same insurance provider, stuff costs different for whatever reason.
Right. And so as a perfect a way of explaining the existence of this Leviathan that we don't see, how would that have harmed it? And why did they fight something that is so obviously common sense, like reasonable goal? Like, why would that system fight that notion? Because it would it would make for a competitive market. It would call into question every one of their premises that centralized authority is good, that competition in the healthcare industry is bad, and these are absurd concepts that only serve to support filling politicians' coffers and stealing value from the middle class. Like,
yeah, sure. And I would say, like, I've heard before that like businessmen actually make the worst capitalists in a sense because like they don't want competition, they don't want free markets, they want to be the ones controlling everything, right? Like it's like I have this expectation that business people are greedy. I just don't think that that's an inherently problematic thing that needs to be solved with government. It needs to be solved by allowing more people to like go in and compete and offer better services.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's important for politicians to then say, like, we have to continue perpetuating a system that allows for that competition to exist. Otherwise, you will get stagnation, you will get regulatory capture, you will get all these problems with monopoly or monopsonies. And that is a real problem that can exist. But like the solution is the opposite of what they think it is. The solution is to get rid of all the government that is like allowing for these players to like have that power.
Sure.
And what they think is like, oh, if we just like regulate it, then everything's gonna be fine. No, you lock all those players into place, and then only the big players are able to survive in that situation.
And all it costs is campaign donations and participation in a corrupt but legal, entirely legal system. That's what it takes to protect your market share, and that is, I think, intuitively, at the very least, a cheaper way to move forward, especially once you reach a certain size. Like, you don't want to run the risk of losing a factory if the next guy figures out a way to produce as much stuff out of a smaller factory. So again, there we even get into the fact that it denies us advantages of technological advancement. It denies us those things that add and enhance value to society. And if we want a parasitic class, they should leave technological advancement for the people to enjoy, which I don't really want a parasitic class, but I admit that it exists.
It does. And it's something that requires constant work to uproot and disrupt. Right. And, you know, again, like to take your example, it's like, okay, how would that work? Like where factories like, oh, we don't want competition. How would it work? You could do it by getting subsidies. Like, hey, we're going to create 100 more jobs if you just give us $15 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds absurd, but like, it's not that far off in New York.
It's credit farming, right? Like, that is real.
Or they say something like, you know, we are an industry that prides itself on safety. Like, we think that you should add X, Y, and Z safety regulations, and you need to go through a permit process in order for a new factory to be built. And like, we have to do constant safety checks to prove compliance for this stuff. And it all sounds really nice. Like, oh yeah, like they're just looking out for workers and the environment. But effectively what happens is it like crushes any competition because the capital necessary to get like a competitor going is so high that a bunch of folks drop out.
Yeah.
And so, and then the only thing that can start a new one is like, okay, well, I guess the only way to overcome all the regulations and whatnot we have is I'm going to have to get an ID, what's it called? Like an IDA grant.
Yeah.
I'm going to go need to get some government subsidies because that's the only way we could do it. And again, I've literally had like members of the legislature and people running for office tell me like, well, we live in New York State. So if you want to start a new business, you should probably just get some government subsidies. I'm like, isn't that insane to you? Like, isn't that like a crazy thing? Like, but like they wouldn't say this, but like part of it is like, I think they like being the ones that like hand out that money and like, look, I helped create this business.
I absolutely agree. I'm going to be like, make a bold claim that it's evidence of a hive mind Goliath that feeds off of, you know, virtue, feeds off of the phony baloney barriers, and it feeds off of all of those things.
We should get back to the actual show because like that sort of leads me into the do something mentality side.
Yeah, perfect. But, let's do it.
You know, we'll save that for the show itself. So we're using up all of our good content here, Tim.
I know, but we got
the podcast audience is going to get this stuff. So
we've got
this is why you listen, folks.
Yeah,
for the
we've got like 60 people on Twitter that need to step up and make some comments. Like, I am tired of the lack of participation that you guys offer. I know you're watching this show. I know you enjoy some of the things I say in my tweets. Get in here and make some comments right now. Just do it. Anything. Just say anything. I don't care. Disagree with me. I don't care. I love it. You're wrong. I'll say it right ahead of time. You're absolutely wrong if you disagree with me.
All right. So let's head back and we'll get into the last segment. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Marion O'Connor.
I'm here, brother, and we're heading into like another nice tangent or ancillary to the topic that is been breaking my brain right now. You know what I mean? That we have this behemoth, this Goliath, this hidden Leviathan. I'll give that the Weinstein couple, Brett and Heather, some credit for this because I've been digesting their podcasts like crazy, and I don't think that they've gotten quite far enough to expressing it as clearly as I have, which is absurdly intellectually egotistic of me because the dude's wildly bright and so is his wife, but we can see its existence. Like we see what it's doing to the decision making in society. So, and we better do something.
Do something. Yeah.
See that segue? Why?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So WSL folks, if you go check out our podcast. Tim and I, we talked about the pharmaceutical industry stuff. We talked about the bad incentives for regulatory capture, things like that. And we almost got in, and we started getting to like the IDA stuff. So we almost led into the do something mentality. And this is what I mean by that, Tim. I mean, like, politicians want to look like they're taking action on stuff. They want to look like they are the ones who get to sweep in and save the day.
Correct.
So we talked about in the last segment with Biden and the formula stuff, like, oh, he brought in a plane full of stuff. Biden gets to be the big hero, but they love being the ones who are the ones who get to be at the ribbon cuttings, and they say, oh, look, my federal government grant funded this, and that's why this business is here. And that's why, like, the IDA thing is like, I think politicians like to be the ones who said, like, yes, I helped you get this money so you're able to overcome the compliance and regulatory barriers to starting a business that cost a massive amount of money that you couldn't raise on your own. And that's why this business is here. But literally they're breaking your legs and they hand you the crutches. Like that's what it is.
Kevin, I had a Democratic challenger when I ran for Senate, and he was kind enough to lower himself to have public conversations with me. And I just want to say, he was literally bragging on the fact that the New York State legislature is Democrats. He's like, I can bring home way more bacon to Senate District 51 than the Republican can. So I can't believe you guys won't vote for me, kind of thing. And I was just like, but that is in fact the problem. It's so not gross. And
I mean, I've literally heard a bunch of people say that before too. Like, because I'll see like people run in like rural districts that tend to vote Republican, and they'll be like, "Well, you should vote for me as a Democrat because like it's a Democratic majority, and it's going to be a Democratic majority, and I'm going to be able to actually bring home more money than the Republicans will," which isn't necessarily true. The Republicans do plenty of that on their own. Like they're fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'll see that as like a reason to vote for someone. It's gross. And it goes beyond to just like subsidies for companies too. It also, like, there are certain problems that, like, if we let the market just like play out, they will solve themselves, right? And like this is, and I would say like most problems are not like actual market failures. They are problems that are going to solve themselves. And we think of things like when Kamala Harris first proposed like the price gouging thing. Like, awesome. we've got to solve this problem of price gouging. Prices are high. It's due to corporate greed, and we're going to solve it. But what actually solves the problem? And again, like, she's speaking to a legitimate pain point of Americans, right? Like throughout the Biden administration, there has been high inflation. People have noticed that their grocery bills have gotten higher. Absolutely. There's a lot of reasons for having that. A good chunk of that being like overspending by government, but like they want to look like they're doing something. When in fact, what's going to happen is if absolutely nothing occurs, that there's going to be substitutes. There's going to be corrections to supply, because like there's the thing with like the egg prices going high, right? Egg prices were temporarily high because of like a particular issue with like avian flu. And there's a big culling of birds, and egg prices went up a bit. Right. And then a bunch of people recognized like, oh, egg prices are up. Maybe I get some more chickens right now. And they did that.
Correct.
And then the prices went back down. It's not that the companies like producing eggs got less greedy. It's that there was an incentive for people to jump into the market. And then eventually the price reached a new equilibrium because like they could only sell it for a little bit over what it costs to produce those eggs, because everyone else was selling them at a little bit more than what it costs to produce those eggs. And so you can't expect to sell eggs that are 10 times what the rest of the market wants. So the correction to this is to allow competition, is to allow people to like produce new things. And same thing on the supermarket level. Grocery chains are not making a ton of profit.
No.
Like a lot of times they'll do this the tricky thing where they'll say, oh, it's profits, but what they really mean is grocery chains have brought in more revenue during this period of higher inflation. But part of how they brought in more revenue was they had to pay their workers more because there's more competition in the labor market. They had to pay more for the goods that they were buying from the distributors because other food things had gone up because of inflation. And then they're bringing in more revenue, but the profit margin remained roughly the same because they could only sell it for a little bit more than what, if you have a Walmart in town and a Kroger in town or a Wegmans in town and a Price Chopper in town, you have alternatives. If your store is going to be significantly higher than others, it better be offering some much more additional value. But if you're offering functionally the same products, it's got to be about the same as what the other players in the area are doing. It's very rare that you have towns with a true monopoly where they can overcharge. It does happen in some rural areas where you're gonna have to drive 50 minutes to get stuff, but mostly that's not what's happening. That's not what they're talking about. So if you allow competition to proceed, you're going to end up with lower prices. Whereas if you end up jumping in, you're going to end up with a lot more problems. But they want to look like the point is they want to look like they're doing something about it. They want to look like they're taking action, and that's more important than solving the problem. If taking action on price gouging ends up screwing things up, the politicians will go, well, at least we tried something. We were trying to help out.
Right. And what they try is ending up contracting the supply. That's what they try. So look, there's a couple other ways of competing in the grocery market, right? You can offer implied value. You can offer more services. Okay. So those are things that are also important in a competitive market because sometimes value is in fact subjective. So let's say my favorite grocery store when I'm out of town is a Stop and Shop because they have 14 different kinds of hot food that I can go in and buy when I'm picking up my supplies and I'm working in Connecticut. They have so I'll pay a few more dollars. I hope their profit margin is higher because they're actually providing me with a service that I find incredibly valuable. So instead of buying a $12 sandwich, I get a $7 entire rotisserie chicken that is absolutely delicious, right? So and I get 2 days worth of snack and meals out of it. So it's that's having an unlimited supply of those available for when I walk in that store is a good competitive measure to offset competition in low prices. So there's ways of competing that are absolutely important.
Sure. I agree. And they're putting more value into that, you could go and buy the ingredients for that stuff, for the sandwiches, for you could go buy a hen that's uncooked on your own and cook it on your own, do your thing. And it'd be cheaper and probably lower profit margin for them. But that additional value matters. And so if they make more money off of it, well, great. They provided a service and I agreed to pay for that service. It's fine.
Yeah. And look, I want to be clear too. There's a certain amount of this promise of taking on price gouging that is distinctly virtue signaling and distinct sophistry. Okay. They can say we are going to take on illegal price gouging when there's no federal laws that are necessarily in existence against price gouging. It's first of all, it's an impossible word to define because value is subjective and not that they don't try and not that they don't try authoritarian measures to virtue signal their way out of catching somebody who had an excess supply of toilet paper and was trying to really score some profits online, which as a libertarian, I thought was hilarious, and I hoped he scored big. But the cops came and confiscated his rack of stuff out of his garage, and then what did they do with it? Probably burned it, right? They probably took it out of the market. It's an absurd concept. So the sophistry of taking on price gouging when there's no real federal laws against price gouging is a distinct virtue signal that robs value from everyday people.
So they get to get the credit for looking like they're doing something while not actually having to take any action. I mean, honestly, that's probably the best case scenario. If they actually do nothing, I'll be fine with that. Fine, whatever, just you made noise about price gouging, and then those stores got in line and lowered their prices. They were going to do that anyway.
Yeah, to further their power mad grab of sowing division to continue growing the behemoth. It's a particularly effective tool, and that's why I find it to be offensive, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like it's silly rhetoric. It is, okay, but it fosters this incoherent ability to divide us because, you know, half the Twitter experts jump on and be like, Kamala Harris is going to punish corporations, and the other half is like, you psychopaths, free trade. You're freaking communist, guys. She's not a communist. She's a fascist corporatist and a liar. Okay, like
Well,
that's a reality. You know, like
so
that's what she is.
I mean, so pejoratives aside, I think they're like,
Yeah.
it does fundamentally come down to like voters want to see their politicians like act, right? Because like,
Yes.
no one likes the Calvin Coolidge politicians. Like, I mean, other than like libertarians who are like, hey, like we're just gonna let things happen and it's gonna work out. Trust me, bro. Like, and like
Greatest president of all time.
Like unironically, that is like my position on stuff, and like people. I know people don't like it. It's not a good selling point of like, just trust us. It's going to work out. Like, just chill out.
Yeah.
And then we saw that a lot with COVID, like, cause that was like the libertarian position was like, listen, people are going to kind of do their own thing. Like give them decent information. They can act, not act. But like people wanted to see politicians do something. So like, why did Cuomo do the thing with the nursing homes? Because they wanted to see him do something.
Yeah.
Like, why did Tim Walz do that? They wanted to see him do something. And why is Cuomo out and doing the press conferences? It looked like he was taking action. Why did people shut stuff down? Like, it looked like they were taking action. Now, it doesn't matter if shutting down a playground is not going to save a single life, much less even like preventing someone from getting sick. But it looked like they were taking action to solve a serious, scary problem.
Yeah.
And that's why like that do something mentality is like such a destructive force in our politics. And I don't quite know how to overcome that because this is something like your average voter wants to see.
Yeah.
They want to see like the man of action. They want to see like someone swoop in and like, fix the problems that are frightening them.
Right.
And like
I have to admit that my plan of mocking them into submission has not at all been paying off. Like they have not stopped. I feel as though I've had relatively little impact with that.
Yeah. So like, and again, I don't know, like maybe mocking him is the right way. Maybe we just haven't mocked them hard enough, right? Like,
Mock them harder. Like
yeah,
that helps.
Like I mean, there's my thing of being like, yeah, no, like just chill out. It's gonna work out because of economics, and people are like, you get the was a Zephyr Teachow article that was like, oh, sometimes you just have to ignore the economists. Kamala Harris's proposed price gouging ban might irritate academics, but it makes sense to everyone else. Like,
no,
what happened to listen to the experts? Come on. I thought we were listening to the experts. Listen to the experts. But again, like a bunch of experts be like, no, trust us, it's going to be fine. Like, just give us some time. It's going to work out. But when you have an election coming up and the pain is here right now, or the frightening event is here right now, voters want to go with politicians say, I'm going to fix this for you. Trust me, I'm going to fix this for you. Just vote for me. Give me a little bit more power and we will solve this problem together. And it sounds really nice. It sounds really comforting, even though they might be making things worse.
Even though history tells us that they're a pile of liars chasing money, right? Chasing clout.
I know, like we talked about it. They don't even need to be. They could be sincere. They could really think they're going to fix the problem, because I think that's how like Harris thinks, is that like if there's a problem, government needs to step in and fix it. Like that everything needs to be solved by government. But we don't need to go down that road. Like sometimes problems can really be solved by smart people doing their own thing in society. And in fact, most of the time you're going to get better outcomes when you do that. Very few problems actually need to be solved by government, but it doesn't look good as a politician if you say, elect me and I will do nothing.
It doesn't think the government kind of disincentivize problem solving and from the middle class? Like, doesn't their very existence and their very stated goals and their virtue signaling and their authoritarian method,
they don't get credit.
Yeah,
they don't get credit if people solve their own problems. If they can't be at a ribbon cutting, they can't be at a podium at a bully pulpit saying like how they're going to like get the corporations in line or whatever the issue is, or we've created jobs. It doesn't matter. If it happens on their own, it's hard for them to take credit. And so that is, and unfortunately we're out of time, but that is one of the fundamental problems with our constitutional system is like, how do we overcome this? How do we create a situation where like politicians are okay with letting society solve some of its own problems. But on that note, we're going to have to call it a night, WYSL audience. Thanks again for listening to A Free Solution. Have a good evening. Take care. All right.
I
know. Just full. It was a good. There's a good show.
That was
Tim,
fun.
anything else that we want to cover for our podcast audience before we call it in the afternoon?
I think, well, because it's Sunday, I think that we should limit that to the next show. I feel as though I emphasized, maybe even overemphasized my point. That's fine. And I love the fact that we got 65, 70 people on Twitter watching. I called for comments. We got a couple comments. Guys, things are happening. I do think there's something perhaps we should do a segment on in the future where I look back on history and I try to pretend that it was in fact better. But a part of me now is getting to the point where they were absolutely just more successful at hiding things from the general populace, and there's an actual reward to participating on some level in social media where we're calling out certain things that we see, even though we may be wrong at first, but we're still not getting enough details. The behemoth still protects information because they know that it's a source of power. So anyway, I think we should talk about that in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the future. I never got to the incumbent incentive stuff, these weird ads I'm seeing from Joe Morelli. And
that will work for Tuesday night. And guys, we plan on being back on Tuesday night. I'm going to be at home base all week. So, like if you want me to join in on a podcast, I'd probably be willing to do it. I am taking up degenerate gambling as a way to fund my retirement. So I might have some limited time because I'll be playing Texas Hold'em. I don't know. But anyway, and look, Kevin, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Our subjects kind of melded together so very well today. That
worked out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening today. We appreciate y'all. Have a good afternoon, folks. Take care.